If you want to experience a thriving marriage, then my next conversation is for you. George and Tondra Gregory are the official chaplains of the Los Angeles Chargers and the authors of the Marriage Game Plan book, Developing a Winning Strategy for Marital Success. Welcome to 100 Huntley Street, George and Tondra. We're so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. We are so excited to be here. Yes. Thank you for having us.
Well, you know, you guys have been married for 30 years. You have been in marriage ministry in all different forms through pastoral care ministry over 20 years. Mm-hmm. So a long time, a thriving marriage that you guys have, and you're building up marriages across the North America and even the world. Mm. But I think for some people, they think, well, I didn't have a good marriage modeled growing up in my life. Mm-hmm. Or how could I know how to be a good husband or wife because, you know, I didn't see that as I was growing up. Did either of you have to navigate any sort of baggage like that?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
So the thing about marriage, too, is like whatever is your baggage becomes their baggage. So even though you didn't grow up with the baggage, you still have to navigate the baggage together, right? George grew up in a two-parent household, traditional Christian two-parent household. I grew up in a single-parent household where my mom was like the dominant voice. His dad was the dominant voice. So when George and I got married, both of us we were fighting for the dominant voice, right?
That's interesting.
And we didn't know that at the time. It was just this unconscious power struggle that we were feeling, but not knowing where it was coming from. Mm. And so navigating your baggage, you may need to seek, counseling or mentorship, have deep conversations to try to uncover why do we keep bumping heads, or why is this something that causes this cycle in our relationship? So that's one of the ways that our baggage can. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, that's in my past, and my past is my past. Mm. That is not true. The past is with you if you haven't dealt with your past. Mm-hmm. It stays there and it comes out and seeps out into your present, and then it can impact your future. Mm-hmm. So dealing with your past is very critical in building a marriage game plan.
And, Tondra, being in a household which has, is a single parent household, was it your mom or your dad who was not there?
It was my dad was not there.
And I think sometimes, too, as women, we put on to the husbands we love the issues we might have had with our fathers.
Mm-hmm. So true. That is so true. Yeah. I say, I came in with trust issues with George, not because he had done anything that was not trustworthy. He is actually the opposite. He was just what I needed. The Lord brought me what I needed to heal my past baggage, actually. And I always say that God can heal us through our marriage, in the things that we missed in our upbringing. He can fill those gaps. But I came in with trust issues. So George had to endure things from me that he did not do to me because of the abandonment that I experienced with my dad not being present, feeling very neglected by him. And, that can affect any little girl in her sense of self-worth or value. Mm-hmm. So I just didn't have that much trust for men in general, but George definitely felt the brunt of that lack of trust for men.
Which is a common story for so many marriages, whether it's the male to the female or vice versa, where we're, taking out on them the issues that we've experienced, which are real issues, and God wants to heal us from them. And even just to hear that you're naming them so clearly, and you've come so far decades later into such a thriving marriage, that's so much hope for people watching.
Yeah.
But a big part of the strength of your marriage is connected to the faith component. And George, actually, you led Tondra into her faith with Jesus in many ways. And tell us about where God first moved in your life and how that rippled out into your relationship with Tondra.
Yeah, well, I grew up as a pastor's kid, so God was always there, but I was sort of trying to meander and figure out other ways. But in college, I just had a dramatic experience with God, and I found myself trying to figure out, after all the parties and after all the heartache, is this all that life had to offer? And man, I think we had a lot of nights where we talked about that, and we tried to encourage each other as just friends. But when I was in a very bad place in a drunken state and met the Lord of all places, right? Where you can meet God is in a drunken state.
Yeah.
But I was in my room and I really heard the voice of the Lord just tell me to get on your knees and to pray the prayer of salvation. And I knew the prayer of salvation as a kid, but this wasn't a typical one because I really meant it this time. Yeah. And for us, I think that was a shift in our dynamic in how we treated one another. But we had no clue that the journey was just beginning for us in our marriage journey.
Yeah.
George, when you said, you felt the Lord move, did you feel your heart shift? What did you feel in the room in those moments?
Yeah, I think I felt so empty before that moment. And then after that moment, there was such a joy. It was such a peace that I knew there was something different. Most people, they question, is God real? But there's a moment that God is so real to you that you know that I'm not making this up because I feel peace, I feel joy, I feel light, I feel hope.
And I know your story a little bit because we're friends in some ways, and so right away you two jumped into ministry together, essentially.
Yeah.
Tondra, right away you guys went for it.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about the early stages of the ministry God called you guys into and how that became the bedrock for the marriage ministry you have today.
Absolutely. So George ended up leading me to Christ. It was a God-ordained moment. I was going through my own personal struggles, and he shared that he had given his life to the Lord, and why wouldn't I do the same? And I said, I will one day, when I'm older, like 40 years old. It seems so far away when you're in your 20s. And so he took me to a scripture that said, what does it profit for a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? And that gripped my heart, and it just pierced me. And he also gave me a book, and the book I read, I felt like the peace of God and the joy. I had been dealing with some depression and feeling emptiness and loss. And I felt, every time I read this book, I just felt this presence. And the book tells me at the end that I have been having a relationship with God. And I was like, oh my God, this feels great. And it says if you want to continue this relationship with him, pray this prayer. So I prayed that prayer. And at that moment, I thought I was supposed to run around and scream or something, and nothing happened. So I felt like the Lord didn't hear me. And I was like, he didn't even hear me. And I got in the bed. But the next morning when I woke up, I knew something in me had changed and I was not the same. And so immediately George and I, and another friend who had also given her life to the Lord, we began a Bible study, just wanting to kind of grow in our faith. And we just began to share the gospel with everybody who would listen. And our college Bible study went from 3 to 180 college students. And we were so creative with the name. We called it the Friday Night Bible Study.
I like that. It's nice and to the point.
Yes.
It's like you know what you're getting when you show up Friday night at good old Bible study.
Exactly.
That's so good.
Yeah.
And you guys began to, George, you moved into pastoral ministry, and then together you started supporting married couples, of course, and Tondra, you went and did a counseling degree so that you could continue to support married couples. One of the places God called you was the NFL, to be chaplains there.
Yeah.
Tell us about, George, tell us about some of the challenges that the athletes experience and their families spiritually and emotionally, the ways you're supporting them.
Yeah, I think NFL families or professional athletes, they deal with the things that normal people deal with, right? How to agree and how to have hope, right? In tough times and difficult times. I think the ability to live your life that when you're on the screen all the time and you're judged really puts a lot of pressure on professional athletes. And so what we try to do is we try to tell athletes that it's okay to be normal, right? Or it's okay to go through a tough time, but get the help that you need, get the professional help, get the spiritual help that you need. And that's why we like to do what we do, is because our marriage, although we were pastors in ministry, our marriage didn't start off so well, and we had to adjust. And so what we practiced in our first half of our marriage, we now get to tell the pros how to practice in their marriage, that love, that peace, that patience. And so it's a daily grind, but professional athletes understand that if I'm going to get better and go to an elite level, I've got to do the things that I have to do. And that's really like we do when living for Christ, is daily habits and practice.
And the proof really is in the pudding, because when we put the work into our marriages, and we do that from a biblical perspective and in partnership with God, and a spouse who says, yes, I want to go there with you to the best form of our marriage possible, it actually works. And you guys have put together the Marriage Game Plan, this book with strategies and skills and tools for people to have the best marriages yet. George, tell us a bit about the concept for the Marriage Game Plan. What is the game plan? Tell us and unpack that for our viewers a little.
Sure, yeah. Well, a game plan is something that we feel like, so most people get together and they say, I do, but they really don't understand how to do it when difficult times happen, right? So that we look at the marriage game plan as you have to have an end goal picture of what you want your marriage to look like, right? And it's got to be in agreement to how do we want to treat one another? How do we want to grow old together? And so in that plan, though, we look at how to define your win, right? Which is the end goal picture, and how we want to treat each other, but also that we got to know we're on the same team. So we got to know each other. We've got to know our opponents that we're going to face in marriage, whether it's job loss or whether it's sickness or whether it's how to deal with each other in difficult times. And another part of that is setting goals, right? Setting goals together so you can have the benchmarks that you need. And then lastly, we say, set your plan and execute your game plan, right? There's so many times that we as couples, we have big dreams of what we want to do, but we don't put in place the things that we need to do. And so this is about basic discipline and skills that any married couple can do.
Yes, and this book is an incredible resource. So many of our team members are enjoying it. And I love this, that, it's possible to have a winning strategy for our marriages. One of the important factors here, Tondra, that you guys unpack is to understand the thermostat, the temperature of your spouse, even throughout making these game plans and knowing the direction you want to go, knowing the opponents that you're going to be facing, but understanding their temperature. How do we gauge our spouse's temperature?
Well, it's about being attuned to each other, right? Knowing that, communication helps you get attuned. I know a lot of people feel like, I need to read my spouse's mind, or my spouse needs to read my mind. Attunement is about having conversations, having those check-in conversations. A lot of times people are afraid to have check-in conversations because they're afraid of what they might get, or they don't know if they can handle what they might get. So they avoid it, and that is working against having that attunement so that you can set the temperature. George always used to say, you want to be the thermostat, which sets the temperature in the relationship. You don't want to be a thermometer that kind of just reads the room, right? So I don't want, just because George is not in a great mood, I don't want to then go there and join him in that. I want to set the temperature and say, hey, seems like you're feeling a little frustrated. I don't want to lay into him and say, get it together, man.
Yeah. And sometimes too, when marriages are in tense places and spots, it's so important to remember that joy and friendship are key to a thriving marriage. George, tell us about those principles.
Yeah, well, friendship, man, that's the key, right? We think about love, which sometimes in people's lives, the feeling of love can be fleeting, and yet friendship in every season, just like we have 4 seasons of weather, sometimes in marriage, because we all grow and evolve, we have different seasons that we're in. And so, but we find that friendship, making sure that you are, my wife used that terminology of attunement. And that's really just asking each other, how are you doing now? Now, I knew you maybe last month or maybe last year, but I need to know your fears. I need to know your dreams. I need to know, where are you most happy, or maybe where I could do a better job. And I think just friendship in general is about keeping that spark, right? Keeping, we spent so many hours on the phone dating, right? And then sometimes when we get married, we don't have but short conversation, but friendship, building friendship is going back to those long walks, those long talks, and making sure that what got you into this marriage is what's going to keep you for the long haul.
And as you do that, you do rediscover the joy of each other, the joy of life, and what God has in store. You know, we know that, of course, society, whether it's Canada or the U.S., is riddled by divorce. And there are so many people watching right now who may be in a season of pain in their marriage. And you talk about that in the marriage game plan, coming out of seasons of pain, coming through them and out of them. But I want to ask you right now if you would give a word of encouragement, each in turn, to our viewers who are in a season of pain in their marriage and how they can move out of that and where God could take them.
Yeah, I think, man, if there are people out there who are struggling, like we like to say, look at us, because we are pictures of God's grace.
Yes.
We're not perfect, but what we try to do is we try to submit our lives to Christ and then try to see how we can be there for the other. And so there's a lot of people who might not be happy, but if we can do it, they can do it. And sometimes that takes hard work, but sometimes it really takes just doing things that you wouldn't normally do. Like, for instance, like there's moments where I've had to go to my wife and just say, hey, this season of our marriage is just not fun. And instead of her responding in a negative way, she'd say, how can we make it better? And that's about that any couple out there can really get to know each other and also encourage one another through any season that they're in.
Yeah. And I would just add, if you're in a tough season, there is hope. Listen,
Yes.
George and I, we were there. You know, you see all these couples and it looks like they've got it together. Trust me, I do relationship coaching and I'm a therapist. What you see is not always what is behind closed doors. But we literally had to work hard to get out of that season. So, you know, we went to a marriage conference every year for 7 years.
7 years.
No new content. It was the same content, and we went so many times that we could literally go ahead and tell what they were going to say. That's how often we went. But it was about getting 1% better every year. We would get one thing that we could work on for that year, and just slowly, if you just put one step in front of the other, or I like to say, if you want to eat an elephant, just one bite at a time. So you can come out of that season, but you just have to start making strides. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. You have to do something different to get out of that season.
George and Tondra, this has been such an encouraging, inspiring, authentic conversation, and it brings hope to marriages everywhere. Your book, The Marriage Game Plan, is something people can do that is different, that will bring different results. Thank you so much for being with us today on 100 Huntley Street.
Well,
Thank
you
you
for having
so
us.
much for having us.
Well, if you're in a season of challenge in your marriage, hear what we're saying here. You're not alone. Every marriage has experienced challenges and difficulties, but when we put our marriage in the hands of a good God, we know that goodness can come out of it and restoration can come out of it. This book, The Marriage Game Plan, is available wherever great books are sold, and we want to encourage you to get it. It is a winning strategy for marital success. God is on your side, and He loves you so much. There is hope for your marriage.